Hi, welcome to Magic Lantern Films' second video rant. And for this one, I went back a couple of years to 2007 to something Francis Ford Coppola, the great director, said, which I found fascinating. And for whatever reason, it did not get the publicity or didn't have the legs that I thought it should have, or at least merit a discussion with film critics. At least I didn't hear about it. And it was something that he said. He was certainly, he criticized Robert De Niro, Jack Nicholson, and Al Pacino, three people who he worked with. Obviously, he directed Al Pacino in the Godfather trilogy, Robert De Niro in the second Godfather, for which De Niro won the Best Supporting Actor award. He also went uncredited as a director in a Roger Corman film that starred Jack Nicholson called The Terror. So he knew all three of them. And in 2007, what he said to GQ, and I'll just read to you the quotes, and you make of it what you will, and I hope you comment and tell me your thoughts here on the video. What he says was, I met both Pacino and De Niro when they were really on the come. They were young, insecure. Now Pacino is very rich. De Niro is deeply inspired by Zoetrope and created an empire and is wealthy and powerful. Zoetrope is Coppola's studio. He goes on and says, Nicholson was, when I met him and worked with him, he was always kind of a joker. He's got a bit of a mean streak. He's intelligent, always wired in with the big guys and the big bosses in the studios. He continues. He says, I don't know what any of them want anymore. Pacino always wanted to do theater. He'll say, oh, I was raised next to a furnace in New York and I'm never in Los Angeles. I'm never going to go to LA. But they all live off the fat of the land. A little dig there. Then he continues even further. Coppola says, I think if there was a role De Niro was hungry for, he would come after it. I don't think Jack would. Jack has money and influence and girls, and I think he's a little bit like Marlon Brando, except Brando went through some tough times. I guess they don't want it anymore. Finally, Coppola says, you know, even those days after The Godfather, I didn't feel like those actors were ready to say, let's do something really ambitious. And then he cites Javier Bardem. He says a guy like Javier Bardem is excited to do something good. Let me do this, or I'll put this stuff in my mouth, change my appearance. And then he goes on and on and on. I find it fascinating because I completely agree with Francis Ford Coppola here, especially as it refers to Robert De Niro and his resume. And if you look at his resume after the late 80s, it's gotten worse and worse and worse. Roles. He's got another Meet the Fockers sequel, his third one. He's really got it. The Meet the Fockers sequel, he did The Righteous Kill. A couple of things I can excuse him on, but things like The Fan, Showtime, Analyze That. I can understand doing the one comedy. Mix it up a little bit. Do Analyze This. But then to do Analyze That. Same thing with Meet the Fockers. I'll excuse him for the first one, but then the next two. He also has another movie out in 2010 called Machete, I think. It stars Steven Seagal, Cheech Marin, Lindsay Lohan, and Jessica Alba. So I don't think I'm gonna be waiting in line for that particular one. My problem with De Niro is, and much like Christopher Walken as well, is he's become kind of I don't know. He does his thing, he gets his paycheck, and he goes. I don't see him doing those great. Really stepping into the role, into the characters the way he used to. Obviously, this is a man who gave us some fascinating performances in cinema. You even look as recently as something like A Cape Fear, and then you can go back to A Raging Bull, of course, Godfather 2, Taxi Driver, and you look at the work he did in the 70s. Fascinating. Now, I'm sorry to say it, and I'd like to hear your opinions on this as well. Now, to me, I haven't seen De Niro give anything resembling a crafted performance in years, and I certainly would welcome it. I would love to see him back, really getting into the craft that is acting. Christopher Walken does the same thing, and very rarely do I see him do it. I can't really knock Jack Nicholson, and I'm not a big Jack Nicholson fan, but if you look at his resume, besides the disgraceful Mars attacks, which I think he just did for fun anyway, you really can't complain him. The Bucket List was harmless fun. The Departed, even though I thought he overacted, really overacted. I think that's more Scorsese's fault than Jack Nicholson's fault. But really, he doesn't really have a blemish on his resume. He doesn't really do nearly as many films as De Niro. So he did The Evening Star, but he was in that very briefly. He was excellent in Ironweed. He was terrific in The Crossing Guard, the Sean Penn film. I guess you can, the one knock you could say, Anger Management, which was kind of an embarrassment. But again, I think he was kind of just trying to dip into the all-out comedy with Adam Sandler. But I highly doubt that Jack Nicholson would do in Anger Management 2 the same way that Robert De Niro would do a Fokker sequel. Al Pacino, I think, with the passing of Marlon Brando and the passing of Paul Newman more recently, Al Pacino could be very well our finest actor that we have today. And he's the only one who has the balls to go back to New York and do theater, and go back to his roots, go back to his homeland, and do theater. I don't think Robert De Niro or Jack Nicholson would ever step foot on the theater in Broadway in New York, ever. And Pacino does have, and I'll say it again, he has the balls to do that. So I credit him for that, and to me, he's a true actor for doing that. Yeah, he's made some mistakes, but he also goes out and he does his own films. He did, his Looking for Richard, which was great. He's done Chinese Coffee, The Local Stigmatic. These are his works of love, his works of labor. And yes, he's made mistakes like 88 Minutes. The Gigli, he's actually connected to Gigli. I don't know if I can, but yeah, I'm going to have to pardon him for that. You don't want to be associated with Gigli. It's synonymous of Ishtar, which I didn't actually think was that bad. But I can't fault Pacino the same way, or point the finger at him like Coppola did, the same way I can Robert De Niro. So where's this rant going? Who are the great actors? Dustin Hoffman is always at the top of his game. Even in the smaller parts he plays, he always puts great character work into it. Daniel Day-Lewis is the only person who I could think might fight Al Pacino for that. The great actor alive today. I don't know if you want to put Philip Seymour Hoffman in there. Certainly Sean Penn. He's a complete chameleon. He's wonderful. Gary Oldman, Edward Norton. Possibly Johnny Depp, but I'd like to get your insight, your opinions, throw your names out there, and I'm certainly probably forgetting some. It's a great. I'll end the rant with this. In 1982, a great movie came out, a Sidney Lumet movie called The Verdict, and this is a story that I read and I heard. So I don't know if it's true, but what I heard was, and David Mamet wrote the screenplay. Robert Redford, I believe, was supposed to play the role, and he read the script, and he loved the story, and he really wanted to play this character. But from what I read, Redford read it, and he thought the character was too dirty, and Redford didn't want to get his hands dirty that way. He didn't want to delve into the darkness of the character that was in The Verdict, that played this alcoholic lawyer, and he bailed out. And of course, Paul Newman stepped in, and Paul Newman was probably gave one of his 2 or 3 greatest performances ever. And in that resume, that's saying a lot. And there, to me, is the difference between Robert Redford, who I love as a filmmaker, and I certainly enjoy watching him. But there is the difference between watching a true actor, Paul Newman, getting his hands dirty, getting some dirt under his fingernails, and Robert Redford, who may want to play it a little bit safe. And here's hoping that Robert De Niro, Christopher Walken, and yes, I'll give Al Pacino and Jack Nicholson just to say on Coppola's side, here's hoping they start to get their hands dirty sooner rather than later. Thank you for watching.